Good evening, folks. My name is Mark Barry. I'm the president here at Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park. I am extremely excited to welcome tonight's speaker and very pleased to welcome all of you. A wonderful crowd this evening, and frankly, I would have been surprised if it wasn't. Bernd Heinrich is probably one of the most renowned naturalists and authors anywhere. He is an emeritus professor at the University of Vermont. He also calls Maine home, although sadly for us, a little bit far from here. He has written 20 books on natural history, ornithology, ecology, and anyone who has read some of those books has probably been impressed by his curious mind, his driving energy, and his incredible productivity. And tonight's presentation is co-sponsored by the Schoodic Institute and the Naturalist Notebook. I'd like to thank Craig and Pamelia, who not only helped to make this presentation possible, but are also here with a group of artists and scientists helping to have an interesting conversation about the intersection between art and science, which is something that's also very important to us here at Schoodic Institute. We are connecting science, education, people, and parks in partnership with Acadia. And a huge part of that for us is engaging citizen scientists of all ages in meaningful research that's relevant to the natural resource managers at Acadia National Park and the region. As part of that, we are connecting people of all ages to science and increasing their enthusiasm for the natural world and their understanding of natural processes. And I think that Bernd Heinrich, through his work as a researcher, an educator, and an author, has probably accomplished a tremendous amount of that, of giving people new enthusiasm and new appreciation for the natural world. And I think he'll probably take all of us new places tonight as well. So please join me in welcoming Bernd Heinrich.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming here. It's a great pleasure to be here, to hear me talk about trees. So I should preface this by, before I start talking about the chestnut trees, that the forests of North America looked a great deal different about 100 years ago. About a century ago, about 60% of the trees, of the forest trees in the Northeast, were American chestnuts. These were huge trees that grew to a diameter of about 10 feet, up to about 100 feet, and they were extremely important for construction, for building, very rot-resistant wood, but probably even more importantly, they were important for the ecology, because they produced ample crops of nuts, which were the basis of the food source of many animals, such as turkeys, the wild pigeons, deer, squirrels, rodents, other rodents. So they were very important in the ecology. We don't really know how much the ecology has changed. When something happened around 100 years ago, which was somehow a fungal spore got introduced from somewhere, and it might not have been more than a microscopic sample. We have no idea. But what happened was this fungus attacked the chestnuts, and in a short while, they were wiped out over the whole North American, eastern North America, where the chestnut trees grew, all the way from Georgia up into Maine. So the American chestnut loss has been a great loss, and when I built this log cabin up in the woods of western Maine in early 1980s, somewhere I read in a catalog somebody selling Native American chestnut seedlings up in northern Michigan. And so I said, just for the heck of it, I ordered some. And I got them in the mail, and I planted them. I said, well, you know, what have I got to lose? It's just a Hail Mary shot, just see what happens. Well, I didn't expect anything at all, but I thought I would just try it out. So what happened was that before I knew it, before, like, let's say 25 years or so, suddenly I had 4 trees growing right close by here. 4 trees. And there were lots of flowers on the trees. And it was just amazing to see these in flower. And I was interested in pollination. I said, well, of course they're not going to be pollinated now. There's not going to be any fruit. And so they did set fruit, but I noticed that all the nuts were empty, no meat in them, so they were not being pollinated. So I didn't pay that much more attention to them. And then one day I found, far from the tree, baby chestnuts growing in the woods. And I says, what's going on? I better take a closer look. And this is what I want to talk about today. And anyway, it turned out that there were quite a few baby chestnuts growing throughout the woods. And so I wanted to find out how it was possible. I mean, the nuts were falling, down to the ground. They're big nuts, and they don't roll very far. But here I found little chestnut trees a quarter of a mile away. So this was very exciting. Anyways, so this is my first public appearance talking about these. I had a little public exposure on this last winter. I got a call from the New York Times, and they asked me to write an op-ed. I said, well, what am I going to write about? And they didn't specify. So I said, well, I'm excited about these baby chestnuts, so maybe I should write about those. So that's what I did. And I wrote, and they published it, and I got all kinds of letters, but one of the main questions was, where did they come from? Where are these really real American chestnuts? And if so, where did they come from? Well, it turns out, the American Chestnut Foundation, just about the time when I planted these 4 trees, they were starting a program of breeding blight-resistant trees that they hybridized with the Asian chestnuts, which are similar. And that's probably where the blight fungus came from, is from Asia, where it is native and the trees are resistant to it. So they've been breeding, crossbreeding, and trying to get resistant trees. So anyways, it turned out that I looked through my notes and eventually found a little folder I had of these chestnuts, and they were, I got them where I said from the Wexford County Conservation District in Michigan. So I Googled that, and I couldn't find it. But anyway, I later found out that it had misspelled it. It was a Westford, not Wexford. And so I did trace them again, and there were Native American chestnuts that were growing up there, possibly a relict population that was resistant to the blight, but we don't really know. But in any case, the trees are now tall trees, and with diameter about this big around. And so first I want to show a bunch of slides of just two of those trees. I kept taking pictures of those trees, and I'm going to show about 20 pictures of them because I think they're beautiful, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to study it, what's going on in the first place, because it's simply the beauty of the trees and to see them in different seasons. So I'm going to give you a little picture show, and then I'll talk more about the biology. Okay, so the four seedlings were planted in 1983, and now they are up to 13 meters tall, diameter breast height of about 40 centimeters. So big trees. And here's a picture I just took a few days ago. It shows, by the way, we don't have a laser pointer, do we? I forgot. Maybe we have one here. So anyway, the chestnut, this is in the forest at the edge, and the chestnut tree is the dark green one on the left. Super. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so this is the chestnut tree, and here is the second one, and these are maples. So these were the ones planted in 1983. And here, a couple of students from the University of Vermont, and here you see the trunks. This is in the fall. And notice this flange around of metal. This was to protect them from porcupines, because two of the trees were killed within an inch of their lives. The porcupines delimbed them, so we had to put those around them. Again, the trunk of the tree in these woods. And here is again the tree in the fall. Again, they keep their leaves much longer than many of the other trees. Here again, the leaves of the other trees are falling off, and these are still nice and green. Now all the other leaves are gone, and these are now yellow. They're all gone, all yellow. Here the chestnut. Okay, now in the wintertime, just to show you in relation to the other trees, these are the two chestnut trees. There's two on another spot, but these are the ones that I kept photographing. Again, now in winter, the snow is coming, the leaves are still on, which is potentially a problem for adaptation for a tree to the north, because one of the adaptations of trees to the north is that they drop their leaves. In fact, I made a study of leaf dropping, and it turns out that it's quite dangerous for a tree to have leaves in the wintertime, mainly because of snow loading, and it breaks off the branches in snowstorms. They will often fall apart due to the loading. Okay, here, finally, they've lost their leaves. Here they are again. Here you get a comparison of the size. Here's a dog. Here's a person trying to walk on the snow. Okay, and this is early spring now, and in spring they leaf on very late. So here many of the other trees are already leafing out, and these are still bare. Still bare. Now they're just starting to leaf out. They're still bare. All the other trees have leafed out. They're still bare. And now here, all leafed out in flower. So this is, here the two trees are in full flower, all white. And a close-up of the bloom. And this is one of the things that I worry about, that there might not be pollination, and I didn't expect any fruit. Okay, so now at this point the flowers have faded. So this was just about a week ago or so. So one of the questions was pollination. Who pollinates the flowers and what? Very difficult to see up in the trees what visits. Okay, so here are just some pictures of some of the animals. So honeybees were one of the insects collecting pollen, and also quite a few bumblebees were visiting the flowers. So the tree was basically humming with insects. Also a tenucate moth here. There are also butterflies. Here's a longhorn beetle. This is actually another kind of flower beetle, very tiny little beetles coming to it. Okay, so now let's take a look at the developing fruit. So this here is the female flower, and this is the male which has gone by, and now the fruit is starting to develop, and potentially on this stem there could be several of these fruit developing. In this case there are two. Here, by the way, is a syrphid fly also coming. And so the female flower, if it's pollinated, can have a whole number of these birds of fruit. So here are at least half a dozen attached together. And here you get some idea of the size. So, so the fruit is basically protected by these heavy spines. So presumably that has evolved as a protection of the seeds. Now, of course, in order to reproduce, the plant has to disperse the seeds and and shed them from the fruit. And ironically, even though they're protected with spines from animals, it's animals that disperse the fruit. So the fruit opens, and there are 3 seeds, 3 nuts on the inside. And so the flanges open to the sides. So first it starts cracking, and then it opens. Here the 3, and here they're falling, and here there's only 1 nut left. And sometimes there'll be 3 nuts fertile, and sometimes only 1. But basically what happens is the nuts are produced kind of all at once. So it kind of saturates the available seed predators so that they can spread them around. Now, let's just take a look at seed dispersal. We all know about dandelions and composite flowers. They have a little parachute and that's attached to the seed, and then it falls off and drifts off and can find a place far away. Other fruit are spread also by flying away, but with the wings of birds. So here you see berries that are red, specifically designed to be seen by birds who will then pass it through the digestive tract and spread them around. In this case, here are choke cherries, and here you see some non-viable fruit, which probably the flowers were not pollinated. So pollination involves animals, and then spreading the seeds around involves animals. And the place where the seeds now lands is going to be extremely important. This happens to be a yellow birch tree growing on a stump. And yellow birch has tiny, tiny little seeds. And they can only grow a very, very small sprout. And if they land on the leaf litter, there's basically no chance for them to become a tree because the roots can't reach down into the ground. So very often the place to be is something like on a stump where there happens to be some moisture and the root can take hold. Again, here are a number of trees, young trees growing on a stump. on a tree stump, whereas on the leaves they could not make a foothold. Now, one of the advantages of the nut now is that there's a whole lot of energy to make a huge root and to have a stem. So that's the advantage. They can supposedly take root anywhere because they have all that energy inherited from the parent. But the problem, of course, is that with all that food there, it becomes a concentrated food source for predators to come and eat. So it invites them to eat at the same time. So, so what happens now with respect to the chestnut seed? That's what I wanted to know. We know hardly anything about what happens to the seeds. All we know is that if you had a chestnut tree, and let's say it has 1,000 fruit, and they all dropped straight down, there's not much chance of them living because they'd be underneath the canopy of the parent tree, and they could not grow. They need to find, in order to grow, they need to escape the umbrella of the parents and find a place. So here are now some nuts taken from the fruit, just to show you what they look like. They're very delicious, and they are very much liked by squirrels. So we know squirrels bury things, but I was watching two kinds of squirrels here, red squirrels and gray squirrels, and they behaved very differently. Gray squirrels came, at least I usually saw one, and that would be up in the top of the tree, and it would be feeding on the, they can open these fruit, so there's really no deterrent. These spines are no deterrent for the squirrels. They can chew through them and get the nuts. And so the gray squirrel would be just feeding up in the tree until it got satiated, and then it would leave. And red squirrels would come, and a red squirrel would go up, and you'd listen and hear a thunk. A few minutes, another thunk. What they do is they chew off the stems, and they drop to the ground, and the red squirrel would spend about an hour in the morning dropping fruits, and then come down and start opening them, and opening them and having no problem getting to the nuts. So these really were not serving any protection from the squirrels. They were eating them like crazy. But I didn't see them carry them off. And it seemed very unlikely that a squirrel would go a quarter of a mile or 100 meters or 200 or 300 meters to bury them when they could bury them right there. As far as the squirrel is concerned, it doesn't need to carry them off. And I didn't see them carry them off. Again, just to show what it looks like, how the squirrels can easily enter the nuts. So there are several problems for seed survival. One is surviving predators, and it turned out that the seeds, if they were just left there, if I brought them in the house, for example, a lot of people asked me, they wanted to get some seeds. I says, well, sorry, I don't have them. I have them in the house. They dry up, and then they're dead. So if I put them in moist containers, I had them in a refrigerator, put them with peat moss, then they got moldy and died. And if I put them outside and then if I screened them and put them on leaves in a little screen, 0 out of 30 stayed alive. If I put them under leaves, then 7 out of 30 in this experiment stayed alive over the winter. If I put individual, this was bunches of them, 30 of them together. If I put individual seeds on the leaves, every 1 out of 50 would be gone. Presumably, they were taken by mice and maybe other predators. If I put them under the leaves, just under the leaves, they would disappear. Now, if I buried them in caches, let's say what I did was I took 5 seeds and put them 2 centimeters under the ground or 10 centimeters. If I put them 2 centimeters under the ground, 21 out of 150 would be there, would be sprouted the next spring. If I buried them 10 centimeters, 120, so about 80% would survive. So basically, the only way the seeds survive is if they were partially buried. And if they were on top of the ground, they would either be taken by predators or they would be killed by the frost. So it looked like they not only had to get away from the parent tree, they also had to find an environment where they would survive. So here is just to show you what a sprouting seed looks like. First thing the seed does is produce a big long root. And then it starts to produce a sprout that will become the plant. The upper part of the plant. So the root comes first, it takes root, it gets nourishment, and then it has the energy here to produce the leaves, to try to catch more energy. So, as I said, there were baby chestnuts in the forest, and here, for example, is one. So you probably would not be able to find it very easily. If you're walking through the forest, you wouldn't notice there's a chestnut tree here. And I didn't either for a long time. Just to show you, anyway, here's a little chestnut tree that has sprouted in the woods all by itself. Again, there is one here somewhere. I know when I was looking down and photographing, it seemed very easy, but at this point, I can't. But one of the main things I wanted to point out is that, first of all, there's a lot of competition for the light, even where sunlight gets in. I think this is a leaf of the chestnut right here. So there's a lot of competition from the plants around it, maple and ferns. But in many places where the seeds land, there is basically no sunshine at all, if it's conifers, for example. So here now is a I cleared away the surrounding vegetation, and here you see actually several little chestnut trees. They're all, about several inches tall, several growing together. So this was an interesting phenomenon to find more than one seed together. Because how did a whole bunch of seeds end up together? If some animal carried a fruit away, there should be never more than 3, because that's 3 is the maximum number of seeds in a fruit. Okay. So, just to give you some idea what the environment where the seed lands has what effect it has. So chestnut trees themselves, some that I had planted around in the light, they grew by 10th of June, 27 centimeters, by the 12th of July, 69, and just now, just about 80 centimeters and started to have buds. Just in comparison with American beech, which looks very similar, it's a similar tree, similar fruit, they initially had larger growth. This is a beech tree growing right next to a chestnut tree, and then essentially stopped by the 10th of June, but the chestnut had just started to grow, and it keeps growing. So the chestnut tree takes advantage of the light and keeps on growing. So they're very good at taking advantage of light when they get it. In the seedlings, the first year, remember they have the whole food supply with them, and they grow about 14 centimeters even where there isn't any light, because they rely on the energy from the nut. So they have a head start and get about yay big simply by the energy that they have, and then they have energy to put out leaves, and then they can potentially catch more energy if there is light. The second year, remember these are in the forest now, the second year the growth goes way down because they have light only, they have very little light in the forest. And so they only grow about 5 centimeters as the canopy closes. So here's a shoot from one year as it's growing out of a chestnut tree in the light. They put out lots of leaves, lots of solar panels, and they're sucking up the sun and growing very rapidly. So here are some where it's mostly shaded, and most of the energy goes into producing the leaves, but hardly any shoot. So, but one thing these baby chestnuts can do is they can persist for a very long time by just hanging on and hardly growing at all. So I didn't really know how old they were, and it's very difficult to say, but if you look really closely, what we have here is, for example, from here to here is 1 year shoot. This is about a couple of centimeters, and here's from the year before. So it was very difficult to age these little guys. But one way to age is when, one thing these seedlings do is if they get light, first of all, they put out these leaves this year, and this is the growth during the early spring, and they produce these leaves. And if they get light, then they have another spurt of growth like here, and they put on new leaves if they get light. And here you see this growth. Anybody see something else interesting there?
Yeah, is that a caterpillar?
Yeah, there's a little caterpillar there. So the interesting thing is here also, this here now is a leaf predator. Anyway, it hides along the tree stem, and that brings us to to these leaves. And I wanted to show you. These are leaves that I picked off the ground, and what they are is leaves partially eaten by caterpillars who snip off the leaves. If you go through the woods now, you probably might find these leaves partially eaten, and they're snipped off. They don't just break off like that. And that's because the caterpillars snip them off to basically disguise their feeding damage. So that caterpillar there was hiding. You don't see any feeding damage there. We did some experiments with birds, and they're able to find hidden caterpillars like this by looking for leaf damage. You can experimentally see, train them basically. If they find leaf damage, then they start looking for caterpillars. So this caterpillar is hiding. It doesn't move at all, and probably somewhere, maybe right here, it looks like the leaves are missing. In fact, this caterpillar was in the same spot for 2 days in a row. So it was feeding someplace else, and then it would hide, but it would not leave any tracks. So also here I wanted to show there are 2 species here. There are this is the chestnut, this is the chestnut, and here, well, actually from the slides I can hardly tell, but the beech leaves I wanted to show are very, very similar. They look a lot like the chestnut leaves. So if you're really looking for small seedlings in the woods, it's often very difficult unless you can really tell the difference between the beech nuts and the chestnuts. So they're both toothed, and potentially this evenness, I think, might also be related to being able, might potentially be an adaptation to have even leaves on the edges so that feeding damage can be detected. Anyway, this is poplar here, and again, they were also snipped off. And these edible caterpillars will also disguise by chewing the leaf in such a way that it doesn't really look damaged. Okay, so this is just where the experiment where I buried seeds and marked the spots with tape to look back the next year to see what would come up, to check between bird 2 centimeters versus 10 centimeters. Another one here. And so these were seeds that I planted myself in order to see if they would survive. And here I could at least see how fast they would grow in certain spots. But here is a group of seedlings that I found, and there were, in fact, here are the chestnuts, and here are the stems of the sprouted nuts. And a couple of them were between 15 and 20 nuts in one spot. Now, these had to be transported there by some animal. And the squirrel could only carry one at a time. And these were like around 200 meters away from the tree. And so it was pretty indicative that most likely it was some kind of a winged dispersal. And we know that blue jays disperse seeds, acorns, by flight, by flying, carrying. And we know that a blue jay could hardly carry more than, actually by the feeder, by putting chestnuts on a feeder, the blue jays really liked them. And I could see that they could take 2 into the pouch, the nagula pouch. They have special enlarged throat area where they can take lots of seeds. They can fill it up with probably 20 or 30 sunflower seeds, but only 2 chestnut seeds and 1 in the beak. So they can carry 3 at the most. But here were 20. So it looks like they might be coming back to the same spot sometimes and bury them all in one bunch. Maybe this helps their memory. We don't know. Again, here you see all of these from this one cache. In any case, all of these that were always together in one bunch were always the same age. Some of them grew a little bit faster, some of them grew a little slower, but they're all the single 1-year growth. So I think this one had 20. So anyway, this is one of the mysteries still haven't exactly figured out how we get so many seedlings all at once in one spot. But I think here's a clue. and the jays would be flying in very often kept going in the same direction back and forth, so that's pretty good indication. So I wasn't able to actually ever catch them in the act of burying anything because they're out there in the woods far away from the tree where I was. But anyway, did get a picture of a baby one, and so I had to make do and draw one. Again, the fruits open, and that's when the jays come and can pick them out. They do not open the fruit themselves. They have to wait till the fruit is open. Okay, but the blue jays aren't there all the time. In 2010, there were no beech nuts producing fruit, and I should say that the chestnuts produce nuts every single year, but the beech nuts not. Sometimes many years go by before they fruit, and when there are no beech nuts, then the blue jays were plentiful. In 2011, there were lots of beech nuts, but the blue jays didn't go to the chestnuts at all. 2012, there were 0 beech nuts, and a few jays went. Last year, there were few beech nuts and no jays at the chestnuts. So the jays are kind of episodic. Sometimes the woods are full of jays, and other years then none at all. And we've seen them actually moving around what it looks like in small flocks. Up to about 20 or so might be flying in a certain direction. And so it looks like the jays might be spread out all over the place, but they can somehow consolidate and go together as a come together as a group and fly off and go to where there are seeds. So this is one of the questions of chestnut of bird communication, which I'm really interested in, but I don't really have the answers yet. But anyway, so we're still looking at finding the baby chestnuts. As before in the summer, it would be almost impossible to find them. But here's a neat thing. These chestnuts are ideal experimental plants to look at the seed dispersal, because first of all, we know precisely where the seeds came from. They could only have come from this one source, because I know there are no other chestnut trees in the forest. So any chestnut baby has to have come from one of those 4 trees, which are close together at one spot. And the seedlings can be easily found not in summertime, when they blend in with vegetation, if there is any, but they keep their leaves on very late after the other trees have lost theirs, so they show up very nicely, and one can see them from quite a distance. Here, for example, all the beech leaves are down, and here's a baby chestnut. So they really show up, and you can see them from 20, 30 feet, and easily find them and map them. And again, here, all the other leaves are down. Here are 3 small chestnut trees growing. And so here now is a GPS map of the forest around. You saw the cabin initially was right there, and the 2 trees that you saw pictures of was right here. And these dots are where there were locations of what I call caches. There could be one seedling together or several. So these yellow dots represent 1 to 4 together, and there was one location where there were I don't know exactly what the number were, but was over 20. And so others here from 4 to 10. So there were definitely hot spots where they were located, and that was not very easily different from any place else. So again, these are groupings within 3 meters of seedlings. And sorry, I don't have the legend here of exactly how many of these were. I had problem with doing PowerPoints. This is my first trial at trying to do these graphs. So anyway, look at distribution of seedling numbers. So I suspect these were over 20, and these were over 10, and so forth. And these were only 1. And distribution of caches. So the caches were lumped as well as the numbers within a cache. Okay, finally, just to the proof of the pudding that this is working, that the trees are actually spreading. They're not just tiny little seedlings, but we have the first actual trees. This was a little chestnut tree that was photographed last year. It's about 6 feet tall, and this happened to be where there's a little light opening. And once they do, they can take off and produce a branch up to about 70 centimeters in 1 year. And where they're in the shade, they might be only from half a centimeter to about 5 centimeters. So here's a tree that's successful, and there were found about 5 trees that are actually becoming trees. Here, this is the same tree that you just saw this year at the same spot, really taking off in this little clearing. So there will be likely a chestnut tree here. Here's one, even it's kind of a shaded area, but still enough sun got in. And this one is about 6 meters tall, growing right in the woods. And this is the same one. I just wanted to point out another danger that the seedlings face, and that is grazing by herbivores such as deer and moose. And here you see where it had been browsed off, and then a side shoot grew, then it was browsed again, and then another side shoot grew. As long as it was low, down here they kept being browsed off, but once it gets above that, then it really takes off. So here are trees, offspring of those trees that were planted by the clearing, now growing in the woods. Again, this here is one of the trees now, slender tree in the fall after all the leaves are down. As I said, they're easy to find. And so another success. So we have trees growing in the forest. And here, planted ones right next to the cabin in the full light, and they're taking off and going at some 70 centimeters per year. And so they're shooting right up, just like the parent tree right here. But this is planted one right here to be there in the clearing. So, so just for summary, there are, as of last fall, I found 239 surviving little trees. 119 of these were just 1-year-olds. So 1-year-olds are the predominant ones, presumably because of big mortality. And but there were 139 groupings of small trees. And this was over an area of 22 acres, so they've spread in fairly wide. and there were none in the clearing whatsoever. They were all in the forest. I'm not sure what that means, because in the light, that's where they grow the fastest. So I suspect it means that whatever is spreading them is not spreading them into the clearing, it's spreading them in the woods. And the only thing, and I never saw the blue jays landing in the clearing, they only went in the woods, which again suggests that probably it's the blue jays that are doing this. The seed survival, again, they seem to be very susceptible to, the seeds are very susceptible to predation by squirrels and mice, and also shrews, short-tailed shrews. They're very nutritious, so everything eats them unless the seeds are really protected. And as I said, burying them by me was the best way to get them to overwinter and survive. So overall, I don't have really proof that the blue jays were doing the spreading, because I never actually saw them making a cache. But I think the inference is that the working hypothesis is that they're doing it just like they spread acorns. And thank you very much.
If folks have questions, we have microphones, one in each aisle, so do raise your hand, and we will let Bernd call on folks, but we'll deliver the microphones.
Yeah.
I had a question about chestnut is in the Fagaceae in the beech family, right? And American beech, has long been thought to be wind pollinated. I was wondering if you have any evidence of insects visiting the beech flowers, and conversely, if you think your chestnuts are wind pollinated as well. Did you look at the pollen at all?
No, I didn't. No, I mean, the flowers of the beech tree look very, very different. They do really look like wind pollination, because they're on these very narrow stems that wiggle around in the wind, which is ideal for wind pollination, agitation. But these are first of all, they're very odoriferous. You can smell the chestnut trees from a long way. And when they're in bloom, that kind of stinks around there. I mean, they are definitely a beetle attractant. And so beetles are the most prominent things that I saw, but also bumblebees, and they were, and honeybees were collecting pollen. And so, but I don't quite understand how, the female flower is kind of separate from the male, and I don't see them visiting the female flower at all. So that makes
them... nectar? The female flower?
I didn't see them collecting anything from the female flower. So, and they, the male flowers open first. So...
But that's common in most wind-pollinated plants.
Yeah. So I think it has features of wind pollination. Maybe it's both, and certainly I would think the ancestral situation was wind, but now it's definitely very much attracting insects. I've never seen insects on beech flowers.
Yeah, neither. So like willow. My other question was, is it known how deep blue jays cache other seeds?
How deep?
10 centimeters seems pretty deep.
Yeah. Well, I had seen scrub jays take nuts and stick them in the ground and hammer them with a beak. But I don't know how, it would depend on how soft the ground is. So I'm not up on exactly how they cache acorns if they bury. I know, most corvids, they always at least hide the seed. They will usually, like a raven, will dig a little hole and put the food in there and then cover it up. And so in any case, it would be covered up. But how deep, I don't know. Yes?
I take it you didn't see any ravens taking the seeds.
No.
Because they
No.
certainly like peanuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine ravens would potentially learn. So it might be a cultural thing. I think if they learn, some raven learn, then they might do it. But at this point, the nuts are so rare that they really wouldn't have an opportunity to know anything about them. But that's a good question. It's possible that in ancestral situation, the ravens might have actually foraged from them. I wouldn't put it past them, but certainly they didn't do it in this case. Yes?
So, did you see any evidence of the blight anywhere? Because I know that that the blight hits trees that are...
Not the slightest sign of any blight. Yes?
You argued that the blue jays brought them one or two at a time. Why couldn't a squirrel have done the same thing if it found a particularly attractive place into which to put its seeds?
It's possible, but they'd
squirrel
have
could
to
have dug deeper,
they'd have
too.
to carry them one at a time.
Right, but the blue jays do it one or two at a time too. So
They do it three.
well,
So yeah, I mean, again, I have no proof that the jays did it. It's just it's just there's no reason for the squirrels to carry them all over the place, and there weren't that many. I mean, I was watching continuously, and they stayed right there in the tree and fed on them right there. So.
But don't they hide them for the winter or something in little burrows?
I don't know. I didn't see it. Yes?
I know it's slightly off topic, but couldn't you just share a very short corvid and crow story with us?
A very short.
Please.
Could I share what?
A story about crows or ravens.
A story about crows or ravens. Yeah, well, I like stories that are speculative, where I don't really have the answer, which is one of the reasons why I like to talk about the jays. But the one about the ravens is even more speculative because it indicates even more interesting things, and is that I had the pair, Goliath and Whitefeather, who have every year built a nest near the cabin. And year before last, they were, they're a mated pair, and they just, go about their normal business. But there were a couple of days when it was still dark at dawn, I heard ravens in the dark, and I went out, and there were two ravens flying really, really, really high, and flying very, very close in unison like this, and and the third one was calling from the nest site that stayed on the ground and did not join them, and that scenario continued the next day, and I'd never before seen ravens in the dark flying so high and vocalizing, and they got eventually above the clouds, and I couldn't see them anymore, and they did this for hours. I could eventually, after I got light with the binoculars, I could see them. And then, since then, over the next year, there were always 3 ravens around. And then the nest failed. The nest was about a month late, and then eventually eggs were laid. And again, I kept seeing 3. And then one day, there was nobody at the nest and I had to climb up and see, and the the eggs were covered up, and I never saw them again. So, you know, there was something at some trio was going on, and I don't know what was going on. So it just shows that they are much more interesting than the theory predicts from what we know. Yes?
Sure, I can wait for the plate. Thanks. So I'm wondering about the chestnuts rather than the crows or the squirrels for a moment. What kind of density, say, per acre did chestnuts have 100 years ago in this kind of environment? And at this rate of spread, at what point will they reach that density again? And then what are they displacing as they start to spread?
Well, I think those won't grow into trees because those little guys, they are eventually going to be dying out. As I said, the largest numbers are the 1-year-olds, which probably means that also I saw many that were nipped off, and even, so very few I think get through. And I think the main reason those few did make it through is where there had been some lumber cutting. And so there was an opening. But once one does get through, I think they will easily overpower everything else because they grow much, much taller. Supposedly in the ancestral forest, I think the number I read was something like 60% were chestnuts. So I think, you know, once an old tree falls over, there's an opening and boom, another one could quickly replace it. But here, I do not think that they're going to, you know, just take over. But it might take 100 years, and there will be a few, and then if one falls over, another might replace it, but it's going to be very slow. Yes?
Did you say initially that they were not being pollinated?
Yeah, good question. I didn't know. I mean, at first I saw the nuts dropping down, and they were all empty. So, but later, and so I didn't pay much more attention because I thought they were all like that. But later on, I discovered that every year, what happens is that apparently the ones who are not pollinated, they shed them very quickly. And so I didn't see full nuts because they would hang on and mature another couple of weeks. And by that time, before I wasn't looking, but now I can.
How do you tell the difference between a beech tree and a chestnut tree?
Well, the difference between a beechnut and a chestnut tree. I tell it by the leaves, but it's kind of a search image. You know, I can tell the difference. The beech leaves, first of all, in general, are much smaller. The chestnuts are about this big, and the beech about this big. There is quite a bit of leeway in range. But on the tree itself, the beech bark is very different looking. If you have a tree itself, the bark of the beech is gray and smooth, and the chestnut is more darker gray and has grooves in it, unlike the beech. So it just, you know, I can't really describe it, but looking at the bark, I can easily tell the difference, and also by the fact that in the forest, the beech sheds its leaves very early, and the chestnut much later. So the ones that I found later on, they're all beech nuts. But I was just looking at my own picture. I wanted to show the difference, but when I see it in the picture, I was almost confused. Which one, you know, are those really beech or are those really chestnut? I could hardly tell. The point was to show that they were similar, but too much so. So if you just had one leaf, it would be hard to tell.
Do you know whether there's any a concerted effort to plant the hybridized chestnuts anywhere? I'm curious just whether that's happening, but also whether it might be another place for research to be done about how chestnuts there might be getting disseminated.
Yeah, I mean, the American Chestnut Foundation has a regular program. There are breeding programs in Maine to, first of all, to introduce the Asian strain and then to try to maintain the character of the phenotype of the American as much as possible. I had somebody from the American Chestnut come over and look at mine. They said, yeah, this is a pure American strain. They're trying to introduce the Asian strain to breed the resistance. I don't know if they are also taking individual seeds from individual trees that have withstood the blight. For example, I think it's a good idea to check mine. What they do is they introduce the blight to see in the young trees to see if they can withstand it. And then they select those that withstand it for crossbreeding. I don't really like the idea of testing mine on site, but I would be willing to donate small trees that they can test on their site. But yeah, a lot of breeding experiments are being done.
The original source for yours, are they still producing?
Yes. And after I did my op-ed for the New York Times, I got in contact with them again after I found out the spelling error. And they still selling the seedlings. And Westford County Conservation District in Cadillac, Michigan. Yes?
Does the cactus blight attack some other type of tree? And if it doesn't, what's keeping it alive?
Well, I read that it also is resident in oaks. Now, there are red oaks all around the forest, and if it is, then they're being subjected to it. But I don't know how true it is, but that's what I read, that it resides in oaks. Yes?
Thank you. It's the first time in my life I've seen a picture of an American chestnut, but I'm from Europe and I'm deeply familiar with the European chestnut. And so I was looking for this candelabra image of when the chestnut flowers, which is one of the great delights for me. And this is such a different flower.
It's like comparing, squirrels with elephants. It's totally like different tree. Horse chestnut. It's I don't know the American colonists. The nuts are round, so that's a similarity.
That's what it seems to be. And that is that where it begins and ends.
Yeah, the nuts look similar. Everything else is
different. Yeah, thank you.
You think maybe the fact that you're sort of right at the northern limit of the traditional range might have to do with the fact that there's no spores and that they're surviving?
Yeah. Well, they were originally in southern Maine, but I don't think they were, I don't know about central or northern Maine. I don't think in northern Maine. But anyway, the American Chestnut Foundation is also looking at different strains from different areas. So apparently there are different tolerances for temperature from different populations. But climate change, who knows? How the spread will affect it.
Could we take one more over here?
Hello? I just planted, I'm sorry, someone else. I just planted 2 chestnuts this spring that I bought from my neighbor, 2 seedlings. Is there anything I should look for if they do, like, how can I help them survive? Are they going to survive? I have no idea, but do you think that they will? Are they going to get sick?
So these
like
are
some data? I don't. So I planted 2
Castanea
trees.
dentata.
Huh?
Castanea dentata.
As far as I know, they are American chestnuts.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think they are a hybrid or anything like that.
Well, I mean, the ones that I planted in the open, they're taking off like weeds, and the only thing to worry about potentially is deer browsing them off, I guess, and watch out for porcupines.
Why don't we wrap up there and join me again in thanking Bernd Heinrich for a wonderful presentation.